fortune of being here during a retreat. I think it was 2 years back. Such a beautiful reception, such beautiful people, that I was very eager for the opportunity to return. And when I was invited, I dropped all other priorities to be with you. Thank you very much for being here. Mother Ganga, she has descended to this world as a river of grace, to bestow grace and blessings upon the whole planet, and especially those who come close to her. There's a beautiful scripture, Sri Chaitanya Bhagavat, and there the Lord Himself expresses His appreciation for Mother Ganga. It tells that the Ganga is the liquid grace of the Supreme Lord. And she has the power to purify the heart. Anyone who sees Mother Ganga, who bathes in Mother Ganga, who drinks the water of Ganga daily, even who is touched by the leaves that has touched Ganga daily, will become purified. And according to our faith in Ganga daily, that purification can be accelerated by thousands and thousands of times. It also explains from the bhakti perspective, Nityasita Krishna Prema Satya Kabunai Sravanadi Sudi Cheti Kuriyamitoy. That love for the Lord is within the heart of every living being. But due to distractions, since remote times, we've forgotten that love within our heart, which is our greatest wealth, our greatest treasure, and our greatest potential. And it is the fulfillment that everyone is seeking. The most fundamental need for all living beings is to love, to be loved. If we have everything else, but not that, we will never be satisfied. A cultured society is a society where we love people and use things. But in today's world, the tendency is so strong to love things and use people. Things can bring no satisfaction to the heart. They can give some temporary sensation to the mind and to the senses. But only love can touch the heart. The origin of that love, the origin of that need to love and be loved, is in the Atma, the eternal soul's love for God. The Bhagavad Purana describes how when you pour water on the root of a tree, naturally that water reaches every part of the tree. Krishna tells in Gita, Aham sarvasya prabhava matta sarvam pravartate. That I am the source of everything that exists. Bhagavan. So when we offer the water of our love to God, our love naturally extends to every living being. You cannot love God and not love everyone. You may not love what people do. We don't have to love the disease. But if we see Aham Bita Prada Pita, Krishna tells in Gita, I am the father and mother of every living being. we understand our own relationship by understanding our own eternal soul, God. And naturally, we see every human being as our brothers and sisters. Whether black or white or red or yellow or brown or male or female or rich or poor, or from one religion or another religion. Wherever there's life, it is sacred. There's no discrimination between species for one who realizes the essence of one's own love. We see with equal vision a human, an elephant, a cow, a dog, a cat, because life is sacred. That is the natural expression of love. And spirituality, it's not just about being a Muslim or a Hindu or a Christian or a Jew or a Jain or a Parsi or a Sikh or a Buddhist. It's about being instruments of that love, connecting to that love and being an instrument of that love, being intoxicated by that love. So Sri Chaitanya Bhagavat explains that Ganga Devi, not only can she liberate us from sins and bless us and liberate us, the smell of the Ganga, the taste of the Ganga, the breeze of the Ganga, the touch of the Ganga awakens that love within our heart. But it is effective according to our receptivity. That faith. Even if we don't have faith, we become purified. The Gita tells, Yeyatam prapadyante tamstataiva bhajamya. According to how we approach, how we surrender, the Lord reveals grace. And Ganga is the Lord's grace, the feminine power of Lord's grace in liquid form. And beyond that liquid form is the personality, the goddess of Ganga. Was the Lord's feminine potency, who bestows grace upon anyone who approaches with devotion, with faith, with an open heart to receive. And I'm saving the part to last. Anyone who hears the Ganga gets that purification. That love is awakened. We just tune in. I was asked to speak about this book that I wrote tonight, entitled A Journey Home. And I only have a few minutes to speak, but I'll say something with your permission. It begins with a journey. I was a teenager, 19 to be specific. The year was 1970. And I was searching for answers in life that were not just out of curiosity or an academic study, but they were critical to me. Because so many things in my life were on the line. The Vietnam War was raging, and I could be drafted any day and sent. Two choices. If you're drafted, you're 18, you either fight or you die, or you go to jail. The only third alternative is to somehow or other sneak your way out by some connection, which I didn't have. The Civil Rights Movement, I had many African American friends. And America, in the 1950s and 60s, when I grew up, if you're born in the ghetto, You live in the ghetto and die in the ghetto. There was hardly a 5% chance you could ever get out because there just was no opportunity. I joined Martin Luther King's civil rights movement because I felt we have to march and demonstrate for freedom. Bottles were thrown at me, rocks. I was tear gassed by police. And I was told that they were protecting my freedom. And I was wondering, what is this freedom? Something America's so proud of. Freedom and liberty. But it was very selective who was given it. In those days, I had many questions. I joined the counterculture. And I essentially, after time, I saw the same type of hypocrisy in the counterculture that I saw in the culture that we were demonstrating against. Just different fashions, different language, different music. I heard Gandhi's words, be the change you want to see in the world. That meant I had to change myself before I could really be an instrument of sustainable change within the world. Martin Luther King, I believe he was the one who said, if you do not have an ideal you're willing to die for, you have nothing meaningful to live for. I had to find that ideal. And gradually I came to the conclusion that change must be spiritual. I have to find myself. We talk about brotherhood and sisterhood, but it's convenient. It's done out of convenience unless we really understand who I am and what my real relationship is. So I went on this spiritual search. I left my homeland. I was in Luxembourg. My first day, and the sponsor of our tour, there were 3 of us, got robbed. So myself and one friend had no money. We didn't know anyone, but we were enthusiastic to somehow or other learn more about the world and learn more about ourselves and God. So we would hitchhike. We went to so many places, to synagogues, to cathedrals, to churches, to monasteries, to museums, to natural places. Eventually we were living in caves in a Greek island. And there I got a calling to come to India. So I left my friend on the Isle of Crete, started hitchhiking to India. Through Turkey, Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan. It took 6 months. Now I take the same trip from London to India, Delhi. It takes 9 hours. It took me 6 months. But an airplane just isn't as scenic or life-changing, but it is much safer. Because when you're hitchhiking, you don't get a safety belt. But the dangers, the trials, the challenges, the diseases, I really believe that they were preparing me for my spiritual journey. And they really did. In the winter of 1970, I arrived at the border of India. And I came to the Himalayas and lived in this Rishikesh area. I remember my first day, I was thrilled to see the Himalayas. I read so many things about the Himalayas and the yogis and the rishis and the gurus and the lamas. And here I was. And Mother Ganga, when I first saw her and touched her, I was absolutely thrilled. It was so mystical. A supernatural experience like I've never had before. So I crossed Ganga Devi to the other side, just near Rishikesh. In those days there were not many ashrams. There were hardly any hotels or guest houses. It's nothing like it is today from a visual perspective. I was in a lonely place. There was no one around, sitting on the bank of Ganga, meditating and praying for hours and hours. And I saw out from a forest came the first human being I had seen in many, many hours. He was a holy man. Long gray beard and long gray hair. He had a golden complexion. He was walking. His robes rippling in the breeze of Ganga. Walked right up to me and spoke. He said, "You do not know who I am, but I know who you are. I have been watching you and have appreciated your determination. Now take off your Western clothes and offer them to Ganga, and I will give you the robes of a sadhu." This seemed like some arrangement of destiny. I said, "What is a sadhu?" First I ever heard the word. He said, "A sadhu is one who is a homeless wanderer seeking the truth." That sounded like what I wanted to do. But I only had one set of clothes. That's all I had. Because in Afghanistan, somebody was trying to kill me and I ran away and I left behind all my whatever little bag I had. So I took off my pants, my turtleneck shirt. They were both gray with black pinstripes. I threw them in the Ganga. I was standing there in my underpants. He told me, "Offer your underpants to Ganga." And I remember thinking, this is becoming really serious. In those days, in 1970, there was no free trade between India and anywhere else in the world. So I was thinking, there may not be another pair of underpants for 10,000 miles. He showed me 2 strips of cloth called a kopat or a loincloth. He said, "This is what sadhus wear." So he gave me 2 simple white sheets like this. And he taught me to wrap one around my waist. And then I offered my underpants to the Ganga. Everything was gone in a fast current. Put on the loincloth around my waist, around my shoulders, and he had long hair. And after he spoke, he whispered something in my ear. He said, "The Ganga will become your mother. This will be revealed in time." And he turned around and walked away back into the forest. I never saw him again. I found a cave to live in the forest. And every day I would come and sit on a rock in the middle of the Ganga. I would have to kind of climb some other rocks and then go in the Ganga a ways to get to this rock. And I would sit from sunrise to sunset. meditating, praying. As the days passed, it was like I was tuning in. There just wasn't any more distractions. I would meditate, contemplate, and the most incredible lessons I had ever learned in my life to that point were just being revealed to me by just watching Mother Ganga. Incredible life-changing lessons are there in nature if we're just receptive to hear and see. One particular lesson I remember is I was seeing how Mother Ganga, she begins her flow from high in the Himalayas, she's coming all the way down to the sea, and on the way there are mountains that block her way, huge rocks, giant trees fall on her. Mother Ganga somehow flows over, under, or around any obstruction. And in the same way, if we want to reach the sea of our aspiration, we can never be discouraged. We should never give up. Like Mother Ganga, we have to learn to flow over, under, or around. And with God's grace, everything is possible. I sat for about a month. There are many pages of this book describing incredible life-changing lessons just by seeing and meditating on Ganga Devi. And from the sound of her song, which you're hearing so beautifully all day, every day, please read the book if you'd like to. It's hard for me even to speak about it. The most precious jewels I've ever received in my life, I heard in the song of Ganga. And after traveling, I lived with Swami Chidananda, who was the successor of Swami Shivananda, Divine Light Mission. I went to the mountain, lived where Maharishi Mahesh Yogi was living, Shankaracharya Nagar. After some time, I lived in a cave with one of the most prominent saints of the Himalayas at the time. His name was Tatwala Baba. He wanted me to stay there for my whole life with him in his cave. I seriously considered it, but I wanted to see some other places also. And I traveled north to Dev-Prayag, lived with an Andamai Ma for some time at Dehradun. With Naga Babas. I'd like to just focus on a few incidences. Place called Uttarkashi, and Mother Ganga flows there beautifully. And somehow I found a very, very beautiful cave high in a mountain there, completely away from any humans. I was living there in that cave. And all my neighbors were animals. Every now and then I'd see a leopard, cobras, vipers, scorpions, deer, wild boar, monkeys, so many monkeys. In Dev-Prayag, I lived with a devotee of Shiva named Kailash Baba. And he taught me how to live within the jungle. What herbs to eat, what herbs not to eat, what leaves to eat. And mostly he taught me how to live with the animals. It's very interesting. He said, if you feel yourself superior to these wild elephants, which we were saying, leopards, snakes, if you feel yourself superior to them, or if you're afraid of them, they will strike and kill you, and you have no defense against them when you're living in the jungle. But if you honor and respect the Atma, the living force, the sacred part of God that is within them, if you respect them, if you have affection for who they really are, and you don't fear them, then they will never harm you. He said, because they can sense your consciousness. It's a crash course. They were around me. It wasn't like I could study for a while and then expose myself. But when I was living in Uttarkashi, I remember I was meditating on Kailash Baba's words. And I was thinking that this is their home. I'm a guest. I have to humble myself to their laws and their ways. And when we do that, it's really amazing how our hearts open. How much we can learn. A little mosquito would land on me. And I remember thinking, what really is the greatness of human life? Is it our science, or our technology, or the cities we build? This mosquito is equipped with better technology than humans could ever make. We've created airplanes, which is wonderful. But we need air traffic controllers. We need runways. We need to buckle our seatbelts. Examine a mosquito. When this mosquito was on my hand, I remember I was thinking about when I was a little boy in my neighborhood north of Chicago, looking up at the streetlight on a summer night, and there would be tens and thousands of mosquitoes swarming like this. How many of you have seen like that? And the amazing thing, have you ever seen them crash? Kind of the system in the world today that America invents something and then the Japanese takes it and refines it and makes it into tiny little forms. That's like we make the radio and they make the transistor radio. Can you imagine making an airplane with perfect aerodynamics this big? With a pilot too. It's a mosquito. When they want to bite you, they don't need a runway to land. Yes, they don't go zzz. They just go they're gone. They can fly, they can take off, they can land and land on a plane. They can be flying thousands within 2 meters and never crash. Incredible science and technology in the animals. never seen an acrobat that could do what a monkey can do, however good they are. And as far as strength, even the world heavyweight boxing champion, put him in a ring with a tiger. Animals are superior in so many ways. But what is so special about the human life? The human life has the power to access the knowledge and the love of God that is within our hearts, to liberate ourselves from the ego of misconceptions, and to actually understand who really we are. The Gita tells, Najayate Mriyate Vakadachat, that the soul, the Atma, is unborn and undying, it is eternal. People become so depressed and discouraged in this world when they don't do well, and they have a tendency to become very arrogant when they do well. But when we understand the perfect nature of who we really are as the Atma, and the perfect relationship we have with God, and with every living being, in our essence, life is beautiful. That's reality. And as human beings, we have the opportunity to experience that reality and to be instruments of that reality. Instruments of God's love in this world and everything we do. That's what I learned from the mosquito. As he was biting me and sucking my blood. Small price for that realization. I traveled to Varanasi. I traveled to Gaya, Bodh Gaya. I studied Buddhist meditation. And I'd like to just, have any of you ever been to Patna in the state of Bihar? It's not usually famous as a holy city. I was there on my way to go to Nepal to get a visa extension, because I was having difficult times getting a visa extension in India. I've already been for about 6 months in India. But I always slept outside, either in caves, on riverbanks, or under trees. That was my life. One day I was sleeping on the riverbank of Ganga at the Collectory Ghat in Patna. I arrived at night. In the morning, I woke up to the sound of shanais and flutes and cymbals and drums and all sorts of Brahmins and other people chanting mantras and prayers and hymns. On the Ganga, in the Ghats, every morning there was this incredible festival of devotion. People would come to take their holy bath. And there were people playing instruments, all for the pleasure of Mother Ganga. There were people offering lights, and offering flowers, and offering prayers. And some people would bring their cows and buffaloes to wash. And they were out there eating. It was very beautiful. I looked up, and there was a holy man standing over me, with a long white beard and long white hair and saffron robes. He didn't speak English, but he smiled at me. I was just sleeping right on the ground. I had no blanket or sleeping bag. My pillow was my arm. My bed was the dirt, and my bedroom was the sky. It was my blanket. And he looked up at me and smiled and asked me to come to his little temple. It was a stone temple with 2 walls, and all the rest was just open to the river. Very simple, very beautiful. He was 85 years old. I was 20. He didn't speak English, but he had a disciple who was 80 years old, who spoke English. And through him, I was given a translation. He said, my Gurudev, he's introducing himself. His name is Radhanath-Swami-Media. He practices bhakti yoga, and he's a devotee of Ram and Hanuman. His name means, he's telling, Sevak means a servant of. One who is a servant of Ram. And then Ram Sevak Swami told me that the greatest service that pleases Ram is to please his children. To be the servant of the Ram is to be the highest devotee of Ram. And Ram Sevak Swami started crying. He said, I thank you so much, my child, for coming and giving me the opportunity to serve you. And by serving you, I am having the most intimate opportunity to serve my Ram. He was older than my grandfather. He was a saint. He was a learned scholar. And I was just kind of a little hippie that turned to sadhu and was saying this about me. How wonderful. I started crying. And he treated me just like a best friend. It's just the 2 of us living there. And every now and then other sadhus would come and stay with him. One time there was this sadhu, he was in his 60s. He only wore a little loincloth and nothing else. Long, matted hair that he wrapped up in a coil above his head. Otherwise, if he didn't do that, he would trip over his hair when he walked. And one day, we had no beds. It was just stone walls and stone floor. And we just slept on the stone, which was fine for me. But one night, we were invaded by what seemed to be innumerable mosquitoes. They were gigantic mosquitoes. They were such hungry, thirsty mosquitoes. What to speak of, they're constantly biting. But the sound, and they were swarming around me. So I thought, all I had is the 2 pieces of cloth that sadhu gave me, because everything else I gave to the guns. I covered myself. But the mosquitoes, they pierced right through. They didn't think anything about my little cloth. That was my life. Every part of me was being bitten, and it itched so much. And I was thinking, I may get malaria too. I'm getting bitten all over, but I couldn't sleep. It was torturous. And then I looked over at Ram Sevak Swami and his friend, and their bodies were covered with mosquitoes. And I saw the mosquitoes getting fat with their blood and then just flying away. And we were sleeping. If an American person or a European person took 50 sleeping pills, they couldn't sleep through those mosquitoes. And they were just so self-satisfied, they were sleeping. And I remember thinking, That's what I want. They're just so peaceful within their own hearts. They could sleep anywhere. We can speak of the stone floor. Every day, about 6 sadhus would come to discuss Ramayana with Radhanath-Swami. They only spoke Hindi. I had never seen human emotions just listening to something like I was seeing there. Yes, they were, for 3 hours every day, they would just read and discuss. Sit in a little circle. And I made Narayan Prasad, that 80-year-old English speaker, promise that he would tell me everything that they read. He promised. And as they were speaking, they were reading from Ramayana, I saw these sadhus, they were in rapt attention. Sometimes they were weeping. Sometimes they were rolling on the floor together, loudly laughing. Sometimes they looked petrified in terror. What are they reading? I've never seen such emotions just by listening to something. What is it? What is it? I waited that 3 hours just watching them, watching this constant emotions. When the katha ended, I sat on the bank of the Ganga with Narayan Prasad and said, please tell me everything. He said, I will tell you everything. And he told me the story. He said, when Krishna was a baby, his name was Gopal. He's the supreme absolute truth, the Parabrahman, the all-pervading supreme Brahman, the source of everything that exists. The all-powerful Lord. And he's in the role of a little baby, hungry for his mother's milk. How the Supreme Lord, he was explaining to me, who is in so many religions seen as the all-powerful punisher of sin, who we learn to fear and obey. More powerful, millions of more powerful than that aspect of God is God's beauty, God's sweetness, God's love. And how God, the all-powerful controller of all controllers, by his own free will, agrees to be controlled by the law of his devotee. He said one day, Krishna's mother, Yashoda, Krishna accepts a mother just to give his devotee the opportunity to love him as a mother. And she was churning butter from yogurt. And as she was churning, she was remembering Krishna and singing songs about her Gopal, who was sleeping in a bed. It was early morning. And as she was remembering Krishna, motherly love manifested in the form of milk from her breast. And when the milk started flowing, Krishna, who was in bed, wanted to drink it. He wanted to taste the sweetness of his mother's love. He was just a tiny boy, maybe 2 years old. And he ran up to his mother, and she put him on her lap and started feeding him. In the next room, there was a pot on the stove. And the fire made the milk boil over. So she put little baby Gopal down and ran to save the pot. And Gopal was so angry. He took a rock and broke the clay pot where the butter was and ate it. Then he ran to another room and stood on top of a grinding mortar where there was another pot of butter hanging from ropes, and he called them monkeys. And the whole courtyard filled up with monkeys, and Krishna was feeding the monkeys with this butter, and he was eating it. And he showed up. She came and she saw the pot is broken, and she followed little buttery footprints like a detective, and there she saw Krishna feeding the monkeys with butter. The monkeys saw her, and they all started running away. Krishna seen the monkeys run away. He turned around and saw Yashoda coming, and he jumped off the grinding water where he was standing on, and he ran away, and she ran, and he ran, and she ran. According to the Upanishads, the absolute truth can never be caught by anyone. It's faster than the wind, faster than the speed of mind. But out of his own sweet will, Krishna was caught by the love of his mother. Radha-Prasad was telling me the story. And then Yashoda had some other chores to do. So she told Krishna, I'm going to tie you up with a very soft silk rope so you don't get in on the other trouble. I'll be watching you. She was afraid he'd hurt himself because he was so restless. So she took a piece of rope and put it around his tiny little baby waist. It was the width of 2 fingers too short. She tied more rope to that and put it around. It was 2 fingers too short, and more and more and more. She put dozens of ropes, meters and meters and meters of ropes. Yet every time she put it around Gopal's waist, it was exactly the same 2 fingers too short. How is that? It's not that Gopal's waist was growing, it was still this big, and the rope was several times bigger than this room. Yet, it didn't go around his waist. How is this possible? When God descends into this world, he doesn't have to think about what's possible or impossible. Achintya Shakti, inconceivable potencies. Soon the neighbors heard about this, and they came from their houses with all their ropes. And there was a festival of ropes. They were tying ropes and ropes and ropes, and every time it was exactly the width of 2 fingers too small. These 2 fingers represent a devotee's determination and enthusiasm and God's grace. And eventually, Yashoda, her hair was, flowers were falling from her hair, she was perspiring for over an hour. She's just tying more and more ropes. And the other gopis or village ladies said, don't you see, it's not Gopal's destiny to be tied today. And she, creator, maintainer, destroyer, everything exists, is conquered by the love of his devotee. That is the power of love. The Lord love conquers his devotee with love, and the devotee conquers the Lord with love. So I really appreciated the story. I said, well, what else did you speak about? He said, that's all. I said, you were speaking 3 hours. The story took 5 minutes. He said, that is all we spoke. The next day, I was watching those 3 hours, and I was just sitting a few feet away from them, and they're laughing, and they're crying, and they're rolling on the ground, and they're looking like they're in such suspense. They were drinking every word. I was so eager to hear. After, on the bank of Mother Ganga, I asked Radhanath-Prasad, tell me everything. He told me the story of Krishna eating butter. I said, you told me that story yesterday. What did you talk about today? He said, that's what we talked about. I said, that's all? He said, that's all. I said, but you were talking 3 hours. He said, that's all we spoke. I was really becoming disturbed. And the next day I was listening so carefully. And they were more excited, more enthusiastic, more emotional than ever before. And these are all very elderly, scholarly saints. He said, I will tell you everything. And he told me the story of Krishna stealing butter. And I said, I was listening. I didn't hear the word Gopal. I didn't hear the word butter, Makan. I didn't hear the word Yashoda. I didn't hear Vrindavan. I heard the names Ram, Lakshman, Sita, Hanuman, Vibhishan, Lanka, Ayodhya. I was listening. Tell me, what did you speak about today? He said, all we spoke about was Gopal stealing butter. I started crying. I was really disturbed. I said, is it that I'm so unqualified? That I'm not fit to hear what you're speaking about? You're devotees of Ram. Why do you keep telling me this one story? He said, do you really want to know? I said, yes! I really do want to know. It's been 3 days. He said, I will tell you. The first day you came, the next morning, my guru, Radhanath-Swami-Media, called me and told me something. He said that he had a dream. In that dream, Lord Ram appeared to him and spoke. Ram told my guru that this little boy that's just come, talking about me, he said, he does not know it, but he's a devotee of Krishna. If you tell him, he will not believe you. But you should only tell him about Krishna and nothing else, and no one else. So my guru ordered me, this is what he said, to only tell you about Krishna. He said, but I'm a devotee of Ram. And the only story of Krishna that I really know well is him stealing butter. So this is the only story I'm allowed to tell you. I said, you're right. I don't believe this. But what could I do? I was 20, he was 80. But anyways, I had such a beautiful experience there. Radhanath-Swami, he treated me like his own son. And when it was time for me to go, I bowed at his feet. And I saw Father with tears in his eyes. He wanted to give me a gift to remember him. But he didn't have anything. He looked around and he saw a branch from a tree, which was his walking stick. Whenever he would walk, he would have this little branch from a tree. It cost nothing. You could get a branch like this from any tree in the world, practically. Just a branch. And you just cut the twigs off. And as if he was giving me a priceless treasure, he handed me that stick. I felt so honored. I remember thinking in those days, if I was receiving the entire fortune of the Rockefellers or the Rothschilds, it would not be as precious as this stick, because it's given to me with such affection. I thought, this is so holy. I took that stick and braced it to my heart, and then he spoke some words that were translated through Narayan. He said, the stick of a sadhu's mercy can save you from the greatest dangers. So I took that stick with me. But before I left, I was going to try to get my visa extended in Patna. And I went to the immigration office. It was just a little old building, and there was one room with the immigration officer, and he had stacks and stacks of thousands and thousands of pieces of paper wrapped up in ropes everywhere. He had no filing cabinets. In those days there were no computers. And I asked to get my visa extended. It took him 1 hour to find the application. I filled it out, gave him my passport. He looked at my passport. He said, you've already been in India for 6 months. Your visa cannot be extended. I begged, I pleaded. I said, I'm in a spiritual search. I'm just beginning to understand really what is my purpose in life. Please give me a chance to remain here. He said, impossible. It's against the law. You only have 2 days left for your visa. You have to be out of the country. I prayed, silently prayed in my heart, Lord, give me some intelligence. And then I saw behind his desk there was a photo of a painting of Ram. And I said, sir, do you know, in the country I come from, people eat the flesh and drink the blood of cows. He said, what? Uncivilized, barbaric, violent, intolerable. So I understood he was kind of receptive. I said, do you know in my country, boys and girls, they mix together and have sex together very freely without thought, or even marriage. He said, no marriage, boys and girls, this is uncivilized. He was really upset. I said, do you know in my country, no one has ever heard the name of Ram. And he pounded his desk and he said, you should never go back to that place. And I said, well, I have to if you don't give me a visa. He said, give me your passport. I stamped a visa. So I got a visa. It worked. And then I was actually going to Nepal for a visa, but I was already so close I decided to go anyway, back to the Himalayas. And I rode on the back of a truck on top of big grain sacks with so many men and ladies and goats and chickens. In the middle of the night, in a village outside of Kathmandu, I was dropped off. And I remember a pack of mad dogs attacked me. It's an incredible story. It's in the book. But they were so hungry. They wanted to kill me and eat me. In the West, we have pet dogs. But if you ever see a pack of wild dogs, they are as vicious as any animal in the world. And they had foaming mouths, which means many of them had rabies. And they were so hungry and so angry. They were jumping and leaping at me. And I realized I'm helpless. But I had the stick. And with that stick, I was just to save my life, I was beating those dogs. Until finally, it's a very incredible story how I somehow or other escaped. I remember thinking, when I was laying down on the floor of a little house where they gave me shelter, how true his words were. The stick of a sadhu's mercy can save one from the greatest danger. If he didn't give me that stick, 100% I would have been killed that night. And I remembered a lesson that I had heard, that in every heart there is a good dog and a bad dog. The good dog represents our divine nature, the goodness of our character. And the bad dog represents our very selfish, envious propensities. Arrogance, envy, anger, hate, selfish lust. That's the bad dog. And the good dog, compassion, forgiveness, love, self-control, peace. The Bhagavad Gita, there's a whole chapter which describes that we all have a divine and demoniac nature. Sometimes this bad dog really howls loud. Have you ever had that experience? And sometimes the good dog each one is demanding that you feed them. And there's a battle between these dogs, and which one is going to win? The one we choose to feed by our moment-to-moment choices. Are we going to feed the roaring, the howling, the barking of the bad dog to serve our envy and our arrogance and our selfishness and our prejudice? Or are we going to serve our good dog? Essentially, that's what yoga is. Essentially, that's what religion is. It's the art, the science, the culture of nourishing the divinity within us. And somehow or other, having the power, the foundational inner fulfillment by which we can make wise choices in our life. Through our yoga practice, through our spiritual practice, through chanting God's names like we're doing in Kirtan, we're meant to establish a foundation that can maintain our integrity even in the face of temptation and fear, where we can spiritually grow and access that love that is within our heart. And that night, those angry, bad dogs that wanted to tear me apart, and their eyes were glazed with so much anger, so much violence. As I was fighting them off, I realized what has to be done in our own hearts. With the stick of the blessings and the mercy of sadhus, with the wisdom they give us, yes, we can overcome the bad dog within. And the stick of a sadhu's mercy, the wisdom they give us, teaches us how to nourish and feed the divinity, the love, the compassion. That is our true nature. Eventually, it's a long story, but it's becoming very late. when I was in Varanasi, Pashupatinath praying to Shiva, please show me direction. Varanasi, I was praying to Shiva, show me my direction in life. And then I was on my way to Amarnath, to a pilgrimage of Shiva in Kashmir, Himalayas. And I was on a third-class train that was so overcrowded with people. There was no room to sit. I was standing. And it was the monsoon season. We were in a field, and it rained so hard the field became a lake, and the train could not move for 30 hours. And we couldn't get out because it was a lake. And finally, when the flood subsided, we arrived at the station at 5 in the morning. It was dark. I didn't know where I was, but I hadn't had food or water in all that time. And I hadn't moved. I was just standing crunched like this with people crowded. So I crawled out a window to get water, fresh air, and to move. And the steam engine locomotive started moving. I tried to get back in. I jumped through the windows and bounced off a human wall of flesh. It was so crowded. I couldn't get in. I tried through the doors, I tried through the windows, and the train was gone, and I was stranded in some place I didn't know where I was. People running all over the railway platform. And after the train was gone, within a couple of minutes, everyone was gone. And I just saw a couple sadhus sitting around a little fire. I walked up to them. One of those sadhus stood up as if he was waiting for me. It was really strange. He just looked and said, welcome home. I said, where am I? He said, this is Mathura, Krishna's birthplace. And today is Janmashtami, Krishna's birthday. Come, I will take you to Krishna's birth site. Well, we're having a festival. So I thought, obviously, this must be where I'm supposed to be. So I went with them, and there were hundreds and thousands of people there from all over India celebrating Krishna's birthday. It was very moving. And I decided, I'll stay for 3 days, then I'm going to get on another train and go to Amarnath. And I went to a place called Vrindavan, just near Mathura. And I went to sleep on the bank of the river Jamuna. And I remember before going to sleep, I offered a little prayer. There's something about this simple forest that's really charming my heart. Maybe I'll come back someday. When I woke up in the morning, I had stabbing pains in my stomach and in my chest. I had high fever, and I was totally nauseous. The sickest I had ever been in my life. I was so weak, I could not stand up. I could hardly move. And I was all alone, and there was no one to help me. And I laid there. I could hardly even roll over, I was so weak. Just burning with a fever. Delirious. And hours passed. The sun was getting hotter and hotter. And vultures were circling above my head, coming lower and lower. And eventually, a farmer came by and just picked me up and threw me in the back of an ox cart and took me to a charitable hospital. And believe me, the people who worked at that charitable hospital, they were not that much better than the vultures. They didn't have time for us because we were 30 people in one room. The doctor, his name was Krishna Gopal. he told me I had typhoid fever. And when I got better, he told me that you're going to be very weak for at least a month. If you travel, you're going to die. You have to stay here. So he released me from the hospital, and I remained in Vrindavan, just living like a sadhu. And you know something? The beauty of that place and the people and the wonderful philosophy of devotion that I learned there, and the experiences I had there, the concept of Radha, the feminine energy of the Absolute, of the Lord, who's the source of all grace, who's the source of all forgiveness, the source of all love, and the concept of God as the all-attractive, all-beautiful, all-sweet lover and beloved. And the incredible literatures of the saints. And I would just sit in the forest and see the cows and the peacocks and the monkeys and the parrots and little children chanting Radhe Radhe. And I would meet with the sadhus. I remember the first day I arrived in Vrindavan, after the day after Janmashtami, before I got the typhoid. There was a man who was 120 years old, I was told. He was living in a hole in a tree, a hollow in a tree. And he only wore a burlap loincloth. And he had long, long matted hair and long beard. And he was so old, he looked like he was 120 years old too. In order to see, he would take his fingers and lift up his eyelids. And he was a Moni Baba. In like 60 years, he had not spoken a word. He had a vow of silence. I guess when he was about, like he was an old man when he made that vow, but he didn't know he was going to live till 120. But the way he communicated, he had a broken piece of slate, this black slate, and he had a hunk of chalk. And he would write. And he wrote English. He wrote English. He was a very educated man. He just didn't talk. And he wrote, and he called me over. He saw me and he called me over. He was right on the bank of the Yamuna. And I went over to him. And he wrote with his chalk. People say, and with his finger he erased it, because it was only this big. People say, he erased it, that the residents of Vrindavan, and then he erased it, are crazy, erased it. They were crazy for Krishna, and erased it. And he said, if you stay here, then he erased it, you will become crazy too. That's interesting. Welcome to a place. But it came true. After about a month or so, I thought I'm never going to leave this place. I accepted the path of devotion in my life. And about 6 months later, a great saint, A.C. Radhanath-Swami-Media came, feeling and seeing his compassion, hearing his wisdom. I really connected. And you know something? I was sleeping on the bank of the Yamuna for almost a year after that in Vrindavan. And I remember one day, because I had completely forgotten, I remembered the dream of Ram Sevak Swami, where Ram told him that I was a devotee of Krishna, but if he told me, I would not believe him. But that night, looking down on the Yamuna, the moon reflecting off her beautiful current, I believed him. this is a few incidents from the story of this book. And I thank you all so much for staying up so late just to hear it. Thank you so much. People from all over the world. Last time I was here, it was the most incredible assembly of people from every part of the planet. I remember there were people from Japan and Iran and South Africa and Dubai, and there were people from America and Canada and Denmark and England, and there were even a couple people from India. It's a very special ashram. It attracts people from everywhere. Thank you so much. It's really an honor and pleasure to serve you.
I'd like to thank Radhanath-Swami for allowing us to invite Maharaji to give a talk here. And for those of you all who would like to have copies of the Journey Home, the book is available. A few copies of the book we have here, and you can get them autographed by Swamiji also. And those who would like to meet and talk to Swamiji, most welcome.